I'm Larry Ray, President and CEO of American Manganese, Inc., listed on the TSX Venture, ticker symbol AMY, A-M-Y, with proprietary patents in the U.S., China, and South Africa. Our focus is on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. China recently legislated the responsibility for recycling onto their electric vehicle manufacturers and importers. For more information, please visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Mike Swanson, editor of WallStreetWindow.com. Welcome back to the show, Mike.
Oh, it's great to talk to you. Interesting times.
Well, when the rocket's red glare heads towards Syria from the decks of U.S. destroyers, the price of gold goes up. But now that we're a week out from that, what's happening with gold?
Well, actually, it's very interesting because, as you mentioned, gold had a tremendous gap up following the overnight news that Trump launched missile strikes against Syria. And typically, when gold goes up based on news, a news event, if it fades on the close that day, that's usually a sign it's going to fall for the next couple of days, maybe even the next couple of weeks. If you think back to the election of Donald Trump, that night, gold went up like 100 points, and then everything fell with gold and the gold stocks into December. The GDX gold stock ETF went from $26 down to $19. So it was a big 7-point drop. That's a pretty nice percentage move. And over the years, similar moves, maybe not of that magnitude, but, gap ups and drops have occurred during terrorist attacks, and so forth. So what I think is the most interesting thing right now is gold did gap up, and actually the gold stocks did fade on Friday from the highs of that day. But when this week started, there was no big decline in gold or the mining stocks at all. In fact, as we're speaking now, gold is pretty much trading at the highs of Friday, around the 1270 area. So I actually see this as a good sign of strength in gold and in the mining stocks. I don't think it means they're going to necessarily go to the moon tomorrow, but I think it's really constructive action, which does suggest that we are heading for higher prices as this year unfolds. Really, any short-term move in the market, which is really what I'm talking about, action of the past 5 days, it needs to be interpreted in what the big trend in the market is. And when it comes to gold and gold stocks, that's the second year of a bull market, but it's a consolidation period following what was a tremendous rally last year in the mining stocks, where they went up over 100% from their lows to their highs, then basically corrected 50%. And those type of moves are kind of typical for commodities and something as volatile as gold in the first year of a bull market. And then typically you'll get a long, drawn-out consolidation period where things go sideways and then prepare the stage for the next move higher. So I really think that's what's going on, and this action following the missile strikes tells me that, gold or the mining stocks, they're not in some sort of position to collapse like they did following the Trump election or, from that November to December, but they're still, drifting and going sideways, and I think that's going to prepare the way for a breakout that'll lead to a really big rally that won't just last a couple weeks, but months almost on end. And what I'm watching for a sign of that starting is the performance of the gold stocks to the metal, because typically the stocks, when they outperform gold, that's a positive for both. And at the moment, they're not necessarily doing that. They're kind of trading with gold. I want to see the stocks going up, and it's like 3% in a single day, and breaking out and surging. They're not doing that yet, but I think we could see a situation where they end up going through their February highs and taking off like that. And that would be a sign that the next big move is starting, and that could happen or begin next month or, the month after. I can't really predict the exact moment, but the important thing is to be on guard for when that does happen. And that's the thing about gold is that missile strike showed it can gap up in a single day and just start taking off. Not saying that we're going to have a war event. I certainly hope not, but it could be stock market weakness or bad economic news or anything that could make gold gap up one morning, and instead of fading the news that day, it just keeps going higher, and the gold stocks really accelerate. So that's what we got to be on watch for, and that's why I'm keeping a core position in gold and the mining stocks. I'm not trying to jump in and out, but it's tough, for someone to put all their money into it, because it's easy to get shaken out. If you got 100% of your money in something that can move 2% a day and can easily, pull back 5% over a couple days. So it's volatile, and you just got to put in something you feel comfortable holding.
Trump has tweeted North Korea is looking for trouble, and although their long-range missiles still have some ways to go in development, don't forget that the capital of South Korea, Seoul, is just 35 miles south of the border. They could easily launch something pretty devastating.
Well, yeah, well, that's a big problem because when Trump got elected, he met with President Obama, and Obama told Trump that the number one national security issue wasn't Russia, wasn't ISIS or the Middle East, but was North Korea and this weapons program. And the problem for the United States is that issue is also interlocked with our relationship with China, Japan, and South Korea. So it puts the United States in a very difficult spot. We can't necessarily, we can't, period, determine this issue on our own. The threat for us is, yes, this guy continues to do more rocket research and get to the point where he can construct a rocket that can hit the West Coast United States. That would be bad, right, for us. But as you point out, he can destroy Seoul right now, not even with the use of rockets. He's got thousands of artillery pieces in the mountains, and that's the real problem, because this isn't a country like Iraq where you can just bomb everything and wipe out with artillery pieces in the army. These things are hidden in tunnels, they're moved around, and he can stick an atomic bomb on any one of these things and shoot it at Seoul or shoot it at Tokyo. What this means is there really is no military solution. We can send a boat up there, a naval carrier task force, but he's just going to ignore it. It's just a symbolic thing, and there's nothing we can really do, unfortunately. So Trump has to work with China and South Korea and Japan to put pressure on the North Koreans. Really, China is the key factor, and if they're not going to help us, there's unfortunately not much we can do. And at the moment, that's where we are. When Trump got in office, they had National Security Council meetings about North Korea and what to do and what are the options. And besides the unrealistic ones of, airstrikes that aren't going to work against him, the other options are to deploy missile defense system in South Korea and Japan to shoot down any of his rockets. The problem with that is for the Chinese, they could see that as a threat to their own interests, because rockets that could be used to shoot down the North Korean rockets could be used to shoot down theirs. And they wouldn't like that, just as we wouldn't, the United States government wouldn't like it if they started putting installations like that in the Caribbean or something, or any other country did. So last week, this news of Syria dominated the news, but we also had Trump meeting with the premier of China, and he came away from that meeting saying that he got absolutely nothing out of it. The Chinese agreed to do only one thing at that meeting, and that was to study the issue of tariffs and trade and get back to Trump in 100 days. And Trump acted like that was a victory. I don't think they're going to come back with anything. And for all the talk of him being a tough negotiator and saying that the Chinese are manipulating currencies and labeling them as an economic enemy, those are the words he said. He even said they're raping the United States. For all this rhetoric, in the end it amounts to absolutely nothing, because I don't think he is the great negotiator he said he was. But not only that, we just don't have the leverage. What are we going to do? I don't know. What can the United States do to try to bully a country like China? I just don't I don't see it, and I think that's why Trump wasn't able to negotiate a deal or anything. He just doesn't have any cards to play. Well, what does this mean for the financial markets? I think it means that the talk of Trump tariff wars isn't really likely to ever materialize. So I don't really think that's a danger to the market. And in a way, maybe the North Korea issue is something that's just going to be a lot of talk, a lot of noise, but really won't amount to much either. In the end, the Chinese don't want the North Koreans doing anything crazy, and they have the purse strings, and they can, cut them off if needed. But it just seems like this is just something that's going to be in the news. It's been for the past couple of years. But I think, in a more important way, it's a symbol, I think, for the Trump administration itself. In November, we had a tremendous rally in the stock market begin. Something called the Trump trade developed with bank stocks and infrastructure stocks on the expectation that he would lower tax rates across the board for corporations and for taxpayers such as myself in the United States, and engage in infrastructure projects, reform the healthcare system. Well, it's been almost 100 days. The healthcare bill is dead in the water. This past couple of days there is news that he has no tax cut plan, and they're not even sure what they're going to do. There's no plan really so far to cut spending, or no budget deal. So the infrastructure spending of $1 trillion is seems to be a distant dream. The point is not to say Trump is a bad person, but all the expectations for him to do all these things, it just doesn't seem like it's going to happen anytime soon. And the stock market went up based on this. So I think the rally topped out the day after Trump's speech to Congress at the beginning of March. And ever since then, the Dow has been slowly drifting down. And I think that was the peak of Trump's power. And since then, it's just kind of, not that he's powerless, but it's just, that was kind of the peak of belief, might be the best way to put it, that he can change everything. It's hard for any one person to do all these things. Obama couldn't make all the changes he wanted to do. And it's just nothing's really changed, even with the stock market. The Trump trades, the banks fizzled out, the infrastructure stocks that were so hot in November, December, they're lagging since the beginning of March. And now what's actually outperforming inside the stock market is Amazon, Netflix, Apple, Google, the so-called FANG stocks. Well, those are the same stocks that were leading last fall. They were leading in the summer of 2015. So whenever kind of everything else in the stock market starts to lag, these stocks become the fads for a couple weeks or months, and then the market dumps because when you have a market rally where the leadership is just a couple stocks, it's usually a sign that you're approaching the end of the rally. So that's where we are now. It's kind of, I think, going to be a sluggish summer with very little upside from here, particularly for most stocks in the stock market.
We'll have more with Mike Swanson right after the break.
I'm Bill McWilliam, president of Cascadero Copper, CCD on the TSX Venture Exchange. Cesium is one of the world's rarest metals with a growing industrial demand. Drilling is underway on our Tehran property in Argentina to prove up a cesium resource. Cascadero's patent-pending leach process has the potential to make Cascadero the lowest cost supplier of cesium in the world. Visit our website, cascadero.com, or phone us at 604-924-5504.
Gem International is a new diamond explorer in the richest diamond producing country in Africa, located next to the fourth largest producing diamond mine in the world. International Spotlight is on an 1109 carat diamond recently discovered in Africa by a fellow Canadian junior with a proven operator and finance team. Gem International trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol GI. Visit us at gemdiamondmining.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Mike Swanson. They call it Dr. Copper because it kind of gives us the health of the markets. Copper has had a great run up, but just today dropped quite a bit. Is that an indication that perhaps metals and other commodities are on their way down?
Well, the whole commodity complex is very interesting because actually copper has been one of the strongest commodities because it had a tremendous rally in November, and it's basically holding in there. I'm bullish on gold and silver. I actually think if the stock market itself weakens, it'll be bullish for both of them because that'll make people think, well, they're not going to raise rates at the way they've been saying. And but other commodities are actually, as a whole, trading weaker. If you look at DBA, which is an agriculture ETF, it actually just made a new low a couple days ago. Oil is just kind of sagging the past couple of months. Oil stocks themselves have been the weakest sector of the market, which is a negative sign for oil prices. Copper could break down. I mean, it's just sitting kind of on support. But there's further weakness in other commodities. That's the point I'm trying to make. What's noteworthy about all that, though, is that seasonally, oil and soft commodities actually tend to rally into July and have a correction in the fall. This is really supposed to be the strongest time for oil, and these commodities aren't really acting like that. As I mentioned, the DBA ETF, which is broad-based agriculture ETF, made a new low the other day. They're not acting right. So when stuff's not acting right, I think that's a sign. Stay away from it. That's what I'm doing. I may be trying to buy commodities next year because I do think in the long run they're going to go up and do really well. And actually, typically, gold and silver go into bull markets first, which they appear to have done last year, and then these other commodities go up later on, and it could be 1 year or 2 years later, and oil usually starts a bull market last. So I think in the commodity cycle, we're kind of in an in-between period for all these various commodities where they're not really ready to go up for real, but, some of them had nice rallies in the fall, and now they look like they're going sideways, which seems to be the case with copper.
We'll have more with Mike Swanson right after this.
I'm Douglas Mason, President and CEO of Rainy Mountain Royalty Corp., RMO on the TSX Venture Exchange. Rainy Mountain's Brunswick property is located in the Rideout Shear Zone in Ontario. With grab samples running as high as 32 grams per ton gold, a drill program will commence this spring to test the numerous targets located by recent groundwork. For more information, visit our website, rmroyalty.com.
Keep informed. Receive our weekly recap of thought-provoking articles, podcasts, and radio delivered to your inbox for free. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage, HowStreet.com. Welcome back. We're speaking with Mike Swanson. Mike, how does the U.S. job picture look like? President Trump claimed that 600,000 jobs have been created since he took office, but so many people are saying that just can't be true.
Well, I don't really think it's much different from where it was before he got in office. We've had a couple weeks where the jobs data was, the headlines were good, but it was the same story of more part-time jobs being created than full-time jobs. And then the last month's job number was a disappointment. Less than 100,000 jobs are created. But if you think back over the past couple of years, that's kind of been the story. You'll have 1 month where the jobs data is good, then they'll start talking about the economic boom's about to come, then the next month the jobs data is bad, and all that talk of economic boom seems silly. So I don't really think anything has changed in regards to the real economic data. Another sign of that is car sales have actually been fading away in the last quarter. The prices for used cars at auto auctions has been in a sharp decline, the sharpest decline over a quarterly period since going back to 2008, which is kind of crazy. So if you look at the economic data, there isn't any, real signs that we're taking off. However, if you look at so-called soft data, such as sentiment surveys, the stock market, consumer confidence surveys, that tells a different story. That's much more positive, soaring in some cases. And the question people are asking is, which is the real story? Real economic data or the surveys of people and the stock market? And I don't know a time in which there's such a wide divergence in which the economic data, match the stock market data. Usually I think in the end the other happens. So I don't, I think, well, let me tell you something interesting too, that kind of, about sentiment. In 1980, when Ronald Reagan was elected president, the stock market had a pretty good rally for a couple of weeks. Then it topped out in a head of decline. What's interesting is I talked to people in the newsletter business, which is sort of the business I'm in, the business of having subscriptions about the stock market or pay services. Back then, all this stuff was done in the mail. And the stories I've heard is that when Ronald Reagan was elected president, the newsletter business just dried up because no one was really that interested in subscribing to get newsletter advice because they just thought Reagan was going to make the stock market go up for them, and they liked Ronald Reagan. And something similar has happened, people are telling me, in the newsletter world again, where since the Trump election, the rate of people subscribing has gone down. And the reason why is the same thing with Ronald Reagan. The people see the stock market go up, and a lot of the people, conservatives and so forth. But it doesn't actually really reflect anything to do with the real economy or the real fundamentals of the market. It's just reacting to the price action. And with the Ronald Reagan story, that all ended within 6 months. So I think something similar with Trump, that this excitement over Trump among some, people is kind of going to fade away. He's been in office almost 100 days now, or approaching that mark, and people, will forget that he just got elected. It'll just be something we're used to, even if the news cycles seem to be crazier and crazier than we've ever seen before.
I was going to say, folks, have you ever heard about the calm before the storm?
Well, I'm hoping we're hitting sort of a calm period, but it might sound crazy to people, but I think it's possible that some of the more radical people in the Trump administration might get pushed out, and it might move more to the center a little bit, be more of a traditional Republican type president. But as one of these advisors of Trump's has said, Trump is Trump. You know, he's not going to stop tweeting, and he's not going to stop talking tough.
Mike, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you. It's great to talk with you.
My guest has been Mike Swanson, editor of WallStreetWindow.com. You're listening to HowStreet.com radio on TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Find us on Twitter at TalkDigitalNet. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Questions for the show or for our guests can be sent to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.